It's a pleasure to introduce Roger Wicker. You hear sometimes people who aren't particularly friends say, you know, my friend so-and-so and my friend so-and-so, but Roger and I were in law school together. We've, he of course moved to Tupelo from Pontotoc as an adult, began his law practice there. Roger's daughter Margaret and my daughter Kirk are best friends. So I've watched Roger as a friend, as a father, as well as seen his other children. Caroline is here today. McDaniel, his son, is serving in the U.S. Air Force. So Roger really is a friend to me and, of course, to all of you. Senator Wicker understands the importance of economic development and bringing jobs to Mississippi. He obviously understands the importance of the Mississippi Economic Council and what we can do to be one voice of business in Mississippi. His advocacy for programs such as Appalachian Regional Commission and Economic Development Administration has led to hundreds of millions of dollars in private investment in our predominantly rural areas. Currently, he serves on Senate committees including Armed Services, Foreign Relations, Commerce, Science and Transportation, Veterans Affairs, and Small Business and Entrepreneurship. Senator Wicker was appointed to the U.S. Senate by Governor Haley Barbour in December 2007 and then elected to a full term in November of 2008. Prior to serving in the U.S. Senate, he represented Mississippi's 1st Congressional District from 1994 to 2007 and served in the Mississippi Senate before that. As I said, he and his wife Gail have 3 children and they have 1 new granddaughter, Caroline. Please help me welcome to the MEC Hobnob, Senator Roger Wicker.
Thank you. Thank you for that Air Force song. I'll accept that on behalf of myself, my father who was in the Army Air Corps, and my son who's active duty in the Air Force today. Thank you. It's good to be here. Blake says I have squeezed you into my schedule. Actually, it's quite the other way around. Y'all have been kind enough to squeeze me into your schedule today, and I'll try not to intrude too much on the time. I know that I'm the only thing standing between you and Jerry Nash and Andy Taggart in their analysis of politics and the elections. So I will try to be brief, but just to say thank you, and it's great to be here looking out over the audience. I see so many friends and so many people who I've worked with, so many people who've come to my office, and I've visited in your homes and offices, and we've worked together to try to make Mississippi a better state and our government work a little better. So thank you for letting me do this, and thank you for letting me be here. I've been reading a history book lately. It's called The Forgotten Man, and it's about the era of the Great Depression, FDR's time, the New Deal. And the title, The Forgotten Man, is based on a couple of quotes that the author, a young lady named Amity Shlaes, refers to in the opening of the book. She quotes FDR as talking about his concept of who has been forgotten in our society, and then she quotes a professor at Yale University. Let me share these with you. FDR said in 1932, "These unhappy times," and certainly we're living in unhappy times right now, "call for the building of plans that rest upon the forgotten, that put their faith once more in the forgotten man at the bottom of the economic pyramid." Clearly, FDR felt like the person at the lowest rung of the economic ladder had been forgotten by the American government during that period. Now, there's another fellow named William Graham Sumner at Yale University, and he had a totally different view of the forgotten American in his day, which was in 1883. He said, imagine 4 men, Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C, and Mr. X. And imagine that Mr. A observes that Mr. X is having a problem that needs to be dealt with. Mr. A gets together with Mr. B to come up with a solution to help Mr. X. And guess what that solution is? The solution is that Mr. C should do something to help Mr. X. And William Graham Sumner says about Mr. C, I call him the forgotten man. He's the man who's never thought of. He works, he votes, generally he prays, but he always pays. So I'll ask you, and I'll let you make the decision, who is the forgotten American in the equation today? I think oftentimes in the current atmosphere, it's that person who works hard and who has to pay the bills, and Mr. A and Mr. B get together and decide he should do something to help Mr. X. When you look at what's been happening recently in Washington, D.C., you can see why Americans are so dissatisfied, why when they answer the poll question, are we headed in the right direction, they say, no, America is not on the right track at all. When you look at $3 trillion added to the federal debt in just 21 short months, when you look at a massive health care takeover that cuts Medicare, that raises taxes, that raises the cost of premiums, that puts huge new mandates on the state and will inevitably require the state legislature of states like Mississippi to raise state taxes at the state level with unworkable mandates. When you see an $800 billion stimulus bill that was supposed to jumpstart the economy 2 years ago, and we see that now, after almost 2 years of that, the unemployment rate has gone from 7.6% to 9.6%, and the economy has certainly done anything but be jump-started. Then I think you will realize why the American people are so dissatisfied currently and why there's such a climate for change out there. I think the forgotten American is going to be heard on Tuesday. We'll see. I'm not on the ballot this year, but I've taken the opportunity these last several weeks of the congressional recess to move around the state and, of course, to listen to what's happening around the United States of America. We'll see on Tuesday. But the forgotten American has an opportunity to be heard, and as our Secretary of State just said, everyone needs to vote. After Tuesday, it'll be another 2 years before Americans can be heard and have much of an effect on the direction that our government takes. I think regardless of whether you consider the forgotten American to be that person at the low end of the economic spectrum, or whether you consider the forgotten American to be that person who works and votes and prays and always pays, can't we all agree that either of those persons would be better served by a more efficient federal government, by a federal government that is smaller, less powerful, less intrusive, and less expensive? I think so. I think everyone on the economic spectrum would be better served with that kind of government, and that's not what we've been getting over the last 2 years. Now, let me mention one last point, and then we'll bring the heavy hitters on for political commentary. Let's talk about a lame duck session. I've got some real ideas about what we ought to be doing in the lame duck session, and it doesn't include tackling this very difficult issue of don't ask, don't tell. That should be taken up by the newly elected representatives and senators that are elected by the people next Tuesday. We don't need a cap and trade bill jammed through in a lame duck session by people who are retiring or who have been defeated by their constituencies. And we certainly don't need to be trying to sneak through this card check bill, which would take away the right of individual workers to a secret ballot on union elections. We don't need to be doing that sort of expansive and far-reaching things in this lame duck session. Why don't we do our basic business when we get back to Washington, D.C.? You know, we haven't taken up a budget this year. First time since 1974, the Senate did not even abide by the Budget Act and bring a budget up for discussion. So we ought to pass a budget. We ought to take care of business and allow people like Thad Cochran, our own ranking member of the appropriation bill, allow him to go on the floor and pass our spending bills. And we ought to pass those spending bills at a pre-stimulus and pre-bailout level. We were spending an enormous amount of money in 2008. I think the American government and the American taxpayers would be better served by going back to the appropriation levels of 2008, and certainly we ought to prevent this automatic tax increase that will be foisted off on every segment of our economy unless we act. It's a shame that Congress left and went out to campaign without taking care of this important piece of legislation. Every taxpayer will have a tax increase unless we act. And this is not the time to put a tax increase on any segment of our economy, and that's my agenda for the lame duck session. Listen, it's wonderful to be back at Hobnob. It's great to see new faces and a lot of old friends. I look forward to enjoying the conversation. It is a wonderful privilege and a high responsibility to serve as one of your two United States senators. I appreciate the confidence that so many of you have placed in me, and I look forward to working with you during the next year until we meet back again at Hobnob. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Senator. Standing ovation. Give him a wave. Thank you. Take a minute and wave. Thank you, Senator. Okay. Thank you, Senator.